Welcome to Changing Suits. We're your hosts, Bal
and Taj, discussing the latest news, views, and general life for us Western Asians.
Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, changing_suits, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Hi, welcome to Changing Suits. My name's Bal.
And my name's Taj.
On today's episode, we wanted to look into our careers and really talk to some professionals as to what their experiences are of different communities, especially, I suppose, the South Asian community, how they look on careers. So today, we've got some professionals from UKAN Coaching. We've got Urvina and Anjali. So ladies, could you give us a bit of an introduction about yourselves and UKAN Coaching as well?
So my name is Urvina Shah, and I'm one of the co-founders of UKAN Coaching. A few years ago, a couple of things happened in that I have three children, and one of my children has got learning difficulties. And she was turning to an age where we had to really be forced to think about her future and where it's going to lead. Will she get employment? What kind of employment? What about college? All of these things. And I'd been working in the NHS as a therapeutic radiographer for 27 years, and last 12 of that were in as a career and professional and career development person, helping the staff and the students develop, etc. And so at that point in life also, I started realizing I really don't have a way up in my career, or sideways for that matter, because what I did, I absolutely loved. But there was no other things that I could do. I could do this with my eyes closed by now. And bearing in mind, because of my daughter as well, I thought, well, I would love to do something where I could leave a legacy for her, because her future is so uncertain. So I thought, well, let me start this business to help. I've got all the skills, I've got the knowledge. Why not take it outside of the NHS and help more people out there? And then she could fit in helping out somewhere or another. And that was my big plan, or thought behind that. And that's how UKAN Coaching was born. I think Anjali can tell you a little bit about how we joined forces.
That's right. So I'm Anjali Gutka, and I'm the other half of UKAN Coaching, the logical half.
I love how you said the other half. Can you just tell us before?
I'm going to use that.
But Taj won't be the logical half, don't worry.
Yeah.
Sorry, go for it, Anjali.
That's fine. So my background is I've been in the corporate sector for 18 years within the financial services. So my experiences are very different to Urvina's. But in that sense of kind of my journey, I was becoming very comfortable where I was, to a point where I was also not seeing a lot of progression. But I was so comfortable that I couldn't be bothered to change it, because it was just nice. I went to work. It was the same thing every day, but I wasn't willing to change it. And through the pandemic and everything else that's happened, you kind of start realizing what's important to you. And for me, that kickstarted my aspiration to also kind of do something a bit more than just plateauing or plodding along. And so Urvina and I pretty much gelled in terms of what we both wanted to achieve and do. I have some experience in kind of my organization working with coaching and career development, progression, managing teams. So we've got both of us have that experience, and we just decided that we work well together. We've had 10 years of experience working together because we've been volunteering in our community for a disability group. So we've already had that experience. So why not formalize it into a business partnership?
Do you know what? Go for it, Taj.
You can no go on. Go for it.
No, we're like, we don't. I was going to say it's really interesting that you sort of picked on, it's something you said, Anjali, actually, that when your career just becomes comfortable. This is the thing with anything in life, I guess. People don't like change. but and you tend to fall into, I think there's two categories I've always said: comfort and fear. Those are the things that stop you from progressing. I've always thought of it like that. So
Absolutely.
it sounds like the pandemic was a time that sort of got you thinking about it, from what you've said. And it's true of a lot of people, actually, the pandemic, wasn't it?
Yeah. Actually, there's a huge surge of people, especially women, who had to really, because for them it became really hard to work from home with the kids at home and their own career aspirations, etc. And I think, and because of that, a lot of women started thinking, well, actually, what is really important to me? They've spent some time at home with their children when they've been at work all that time, and it suddenly showed them a different perspective too. And they were starting to figure, well, actually, what kind of balance do I want? Everybody's work life balance is different. And people started questioning that. And a lot of women left the workforce to think about where they need to be, what they want to do, what is important to them, what brings them joy, and also impacts their family, their friends, themselves. So it was a big time for change for so many people.
What made you, how did you take that big leap? Because the comfort zone, the money's coming in, let's face it, it's coming in steadily. You
Yeah.
get a paycheck. I don't know if
Yeah.
you term it that these days, but you get a paycheck at the end of the month. But now you're going to step into a business where you have to drum up business,
Yeah.
and you have to, how did you take that big step? And what,
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it's quite interesting because it's not easy to take that step. And I'll give you my example. Both of us are in different places with regards to that. So I'll give you my example of that exactly. You know, when you have a mortgage to pay, you've got bills, you've got responsibilities. The finances play such a huge part in taking that leap. So we started UKAN coaching about 3 years ago, and we were both working in it part time. So we still had our day jobs, and then we were working on it part time just to build up kind of the business and work out what we wanted to do. But it was getting to a point where it was unsustainable to have two jobs effectively, and you're not focusing on either very well. For me, the decision kind of came post pandemic, and when we were returning back to work, and I kind of went, now's the time to make that change. It's worth taking that risk. It's a calculated risk. Made sure that I'm financially secure for whatever time there is to make this business work for the two of us. But it's not an easy decision, and it took months of back and forth. Should I do it? Should I not do it? Have I got enough finances? What happens? And you still can't factor in everything. Even then, I hadn't factored in inflation. I hadn't factored in Ukrainian war.
The war, I was about to say.
why
no.
didn't you factor that in? Why didn't you know?
So there's always going to be unknown, and I think that's the key point here. You will never be ready. You will never know everything that is going to come in, and therefore you make the best decision with the information that you have. And a lot of it then became that belief in kind of myself, in what we're providing, what we're achieving, and that then trumped everything to kind of go, you know what, if I don't do it now, I'm going to
Then
have
when?
to wait decades. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
going to have to wait decades before I take that step again. And am I willing to look back in 10 years' time and say, oh my God, I should have done it 10 years ago? I
What
don't
was your
want that
response
regret.
from your family? Because the South Asian responses.
I love
Are you
the fact that
crazy?
I love the fact that both of you started laughing and looked at each other when she asked the question. That
Because we
answers
know
it
what we're
slightly.
talking about, don't we?
This is it. This is it. So I know personally for me, my parents were really concerned because it's not the done thing. It's like,
Hit the nail on the head.
yeah, hang on a minute, you got all these bills, you've got debt, you've got this, that, how are you going to even live? What are you going to do? You have to have an income, don't you? And it was this unheard thing of, how can you go into a business when you're not sure of what your income's going to look like? um and it took a lot of for me particularly, it took a lot of time to kind of just block it all out.
Yeah.
It raised fears. I mean, there were moments when I know Rina and I had this conversation, and I went, am I making the right decision? Oh my god, what if? But at the end of the day, there's a bit of confidence, and with the right support, it's absolutely doable. My parents have now come round to it, but it took them 18 months. So it took me that long to convince them and get their buy-in before I could take the step.
Well, that's a
This
journey in itself, isn't it, Belle? Yeah, you were going to say
I was
it.
just about to say. I mean, we've discussed this before, actually, and you mentioned it yourself. Your parents had said it, and it's interesting. We did an episode a little while ago with it was called Desi Parenting, the other podcast, and we had a mother and son talking, and it was interesting hearing the next generation's view on what our parents say. And that's exactly what you've said here. Are you going to make that big change in your life? Yes, the comfort you've got, it is a risk, but obviously you're willing to do it. But do you think the fact that your parents were saying it made you second guess yourself, and perhaps would it have talked you out of the decision?
Um,
I think partly what helped was me being in the picture,
Yeah. Okay.
right? My situation is different. I'm in a different phase of life. My kids are older, etc., etc. It was a much easier process.
Mm.
There was no one, and also the work that I was doing, there was nothing else. So there was an easier, people were more accepting of it. But what made it then helpful for Anjali is that seeing what I was doing, because I left last March, and Anjali left by, I think, end of last year.
Yeah.
So that time difference between me working and not, as in I was still working at home, but not in the NHS, showed a different view. It visually, she could see, it was tangible. She could see what I was doing, what I was getting out of it, how it was affecting my health, or the impact it was having on me and people around me. And we were always, and luckily for her as well, I was a little bit of a sounding board then.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important when people are making those decisions, they have somebody who's strong enough to be able to hear them out, really listen, ask the right questions, and then they can help make that decision themselves.
And this is the
Because
thing. It's interesting because I completely agree with what you've just said. I mean, it is that support. If you've got that support, then even your parents saying anything might just be a bit of a "don't worry about it" sort of situation. And you don't tell them until after you've done it, which I always promote.
Well, that's the nuclear option, yes, and that was plan B. If plan A didn't work, but luckily for me, plan A with our parents, you always have a 4 point or a 5 point argument, is what I say. So you start with the soft one, and then you start building your case for it until it's all logical, and they have no choice but to accept it.
Why do you think Desi parenting is like this, where it's almost being afraid? They're not doing it out of spite or in a
No.
horrible
It's out of
way.
love. It's out of
It's
love.
out of love. But why is there that fear of your children going into a new
Career
arena?
path.
You could,
Yeah.
career path. Why do you think that happens?
personally, I think there's a lot of factors, and the biggest factor is from where we come from, how we've moved around,
Yeah.
how we've not been, many have not been, you're not associated with a particular country. People have migrated so much, been almost nomadic. So the thing that held it together for so many was the education and getting a good job, the stability and security. And that's been ingrained in us for so long. I mean, we've moved from India to Africa to the Western countries. I mean, we're all over the place. And so I still, to a certain extent, even my generation still think like that. And I know with my children, we've never expressed that you've got to do accountancy or pharmacy or whatever, which is what we had.
The typical,
Right?
the typical
Those
careers
were
that
your
we all get.
vocational courses
Yeah.
that gave you that stability. And that's where it stems from. And culturally, it was so important that we had an identity then.
Arina, you actually said earlier the reason you decided to make this big leap, I suppose, was for your daughter.
Yeah.
And although we're always having go on our parents for being desi parents, but that is one of the important things of being South Asians, because you are always thinking, and it's a massive positive. You're always thinking about your kids or another member of your family, and that's,
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, funny,
it's sort of intertwined where it's now
completely.
a positive.
And funny you say that because actually, until I had my second child, which is my daughter, I actually nothing, no, things just I just did things. They just came along. I did them. But the moment we discovered her difficulties, honestly, my whole life has been driven by what will it do for her. How will she see things if I do this? How will she react to it? What will happen for her? So even our
Yeah.
disability group that we run was because of, well, I needed for her to be integrated into our community.
Can I ask, just out of interest, and you don't have to share this
Yeah.
if you don't want it, Rebecca, can I ask what the disability is?
Yeah, she's got something called global development delay. I mean, it's a big umbrella. And
Yeah.
within that, she's got elements of dyspraxia, which is motor coordination development disorder, or she's also got speech and language disorder and all other kinds of little things that there's no point mentioning.
No, but
But
the reason I asked that, Irvina, I know we're completely going off track, which we usually do in our podcast, to be
This,
fair. But we are this, we have had a podcast where we are talking about disability, and that's another thing where, in the South Asian community,
mm,
we don't talk about it enough, and that's why I wanted to find out, to be fair,
yeah,
because the more we bring this
yeah,
in the
yeah.
mm,
open, hopefully it does bring more career opportunities for your daughter and other people.
Yeah.
So it's so
Well,
important.
I tell you what, the one of the things that we've found in our this disability group we run is that well, I set it up originally for the children, thinking they have somewhere to go,
Mm.
they can be part of the community. But actually, what I found for me personally, the thing that has really blown me away is that it's given an opportunity and a space for the parents to share with each other, to find out things that are out there, because there is loads, but you don't know about it. No one tells you. You
mm,
just find out by trial and error. And this is provided such a good space for them to feel safe and for them to talk about all the problems, or nobody is judgmental. And that's what I found has been superb. And we've learned, even though we know about our disability, but we've learned so much else about how we can help her or for our other children.
mm.
So it's quite amazing when things like that are around within your community. Because and one father once told me, and his daughter is in a wheelchair and in her late 20s, and he said to us actually, that if it wasn't for this group, I don't know where my daughter would go, because after the age of 25, or even once they leave school, there's very little out there. And so she absolutely loves being part of this community, and that's the whole point.
Again, it's raising awareness. It
Yeah.
really is.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, ladies, let's talk about the fact that you've started this journey. I really wanted to find out the type of clients that you're getting through your coaching practice.
Hmm.
So, do you tend to find a certain community that tends to come to yourselves? Firstly,
Not
No.
not particularly, no.
Mhm.
What our focus is actually is working with women, and because of our experiences, we're kind of looking at helping women who've reached that point in their careers where they just don't know where they can go next. They can do things with their eyes closed, and it's there's just no way out for them, and we kind of work with them to help them figure things out. What's the next move? And then it's the support and confidence that we give them. Quite, we've got a varied base of client in terms of backgrounds, etc. So they've come from corporate, they've come from NHS, they've got different cultural
Mm.
aspects as well, and it's been fascinating in the sense that the career doesn't look at some of those things. It's a bit agnostic to it, and yet the things that we can achieve are all determined by that nurture element, that culture, the environment that we live in. And it's been really fascinating for us to kind of work through that with the women who come to us.
Do you think the fact that you went through very similar experiences, not knowing what the next step was, do you think that helps your clients?
I think it does. I think it does. And particularly often when I've mentioned, because I changed my career at the age of 52. And so that often, when you can say that quite confidently, people think, oh, okay, if you can at 52, surely I can at 37,
Yeah, that's a
right?
really interesting point. Yeah, that is,
Because
isn't
they
it?
can see, and they can see somebody else who's been there and done that. And yes, absolutely, you understand the fears. And there's so many fears. I mean, it's a huge umbrella, this fear.
You've mentioned age. Do you think that it gets easier or harder as you get older to make that decision in that case?
I don't think that age makes a difference,
Okay.
because everybody's situation is so different. And it's so specific to them, because of course their own fears and worries are individual to them. So no, I don't think it does, because we've come across women who are late 30s, 40s, 50s, even nearing retirement age. And the fears are the same. And I tell you, the biggest fear is the money.
Mm.
No matter what age.
The pandemic, I mean, we discussed this earlier. The pandemic did really focus a lot of people on what do I actually want in my life. Obviously,
Yes.
that as soon as the pandemic went past, we went back to a normal life. You couldn't see the stars anymore in the sky because the traffic was back on where it needed to be. Um, but do you think that had an impact? Because obviously you were doing this pre-pandemic anyway. What kind of
Yes.
difference did you see before and after?
So there was a stark difference. um it's difficult to quantify it, obviously, but what we see in research, you see it, in papers and magazines, and everywhere, is this talk about this great resignation that's happened here as well as in the US and in lots of places, and predominantly more than 50% of those are women who have resigned. Now, what it doesn't talk about, obviously, is whether they had something else lined up already, or whether they've just decided, I've had enough and I'm out and I need some time out to figure out the next move. But what it's shown us is that um, people are now more careful about what they're choosing to do with their time.
Mm.
And therefore, even in terms of where you're employed, you're carefully kind of evaluating, is this worth my time? Not just the finances.
So, say I came to you and I said, right, I'm at a point in my life where I'm not like Irvina was saying, I'm not going anywhere, worried about my finances. What kind of, like, that's the reason why I'm not moving on to
Yeah.
another career. What advice would you offer me? What would you say to me? Bite the
Oh,
bullet, go for it.
Mm.
I'll pay
yeah,
for it.
That
Not
would be
quite.
good.
yeah.
That would
I
be
mean,
good.
ultimately, that's what you need
That's
to
what
do.
you need to do.
But
Yeah.
obviously, there are so many steps before you think
Yeah,
about
definitely.
Yeah.
which is what you
We do.
did,
Yeah.
analyzed
Yeah,
everything and
exactly.
whatever.
So what we help with is, and not everyone has the fear of money. For some
Yeah.
people, it's completely, they're in a completely different phase, and it's not so much about the money as about making an impact or having a purpose, or they feel that what they're doing now makes a difference to others. Everyone's got slightly different tangents to what they're looking for, and what we help to figure out is, what is that thing that you're looking for. You don't quit a job because you're not paid enough. You're quitting a job because there's something else behind it. Like, the first question I'd say is, if they double your salary, are you going to stay on there just for the money? And if you are, then that's your
Choice.
choice, and that's what you're looking for. But in a lot of instances, we find that what people are then kind of looking at is, well, actually, I just don't want to stay there, even if they offer me a pay rise or extra money or whatever it is, because it's about the work, it's about what they're getting out of it.
I just want to pick up on this point, and I'm going to go back to the age thing.
Yeah.
Only because, do you find, and I'm sort of self-reflecting, if nothing else, as I'm getting older, and other people that I know are getting older, the focus does shift slightly. So where you're younger, you're like, yep, I'm going to go for that. I'm going to do X, Y, Z to get as much money as I possibly can.
Yeah.
But then as you get older, you sort of hit a point where you're like, actually, do you know what? It's not the money that, what you just said, in fact, Anjali, it's not the money that's making me happy. So again, what is? So do you think, again, going back to that previous question, do you think age does have an impact on that decision of having a career change?
Yeah, mostly. I think when people first start out, there is that excitement. They're willing to take the risk, they're willing to gather their knowledge and skills in their toolkit and move around, and they'll try all sorts of things. And you're right, they get to a certain point. And I think moms in particular, when they become moms, that priority shifts. And that's when they start thinking as well, okay, they may have taken maternity leave and they come back and think, well, actually, this doesn't feel the same as it did before.
And a lot of people do make, I mean, I know in my own case, it was a case of, oh, mat leave, I'll have 1 year, well, the second time, I'll have 1 year off. So I'll have the chance to do everything I've always wanted.
Yeah.
Obviously, you hit mat leave and you're like, it's the
Yeah.
end of mat leave. I didn't end up doing anything because I actually had a child to look after.
That's it. That's
Correct.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, the age does play a part in it, which is what we've found. And most of our women that come to us are range between the ages of 35 to 55, mostly. And even those around the 35-year age group have done a fair amount of work in their careers already and are starting their next chapter in their life potentially, and so are starting to think about, well, actually, what is, they want that balance now. If they've got a partner, or for example, I had a lady who had recently got married, was her mid-30s, Asian lady, and had a partner, now was starting to think about, well, actually, my work is not offering me the kind of balance that I want to give me time with my husband. And she loved her work, but the work where she was at wasn't offering her that.
Do you think men would, in the same, ask those questions to themselves as well? I'm not getting that work-life balance. I'm not spending. Do you think there is a gender difference?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, actually. I think there is a difference, but it's also changing. Let's kind of look at, with the new generations that are coming up, there's a bit more balance there. But with kind of how, if I look at, even the not so much the millennials, but the generation before that, there's still like a big gap in that thought process. Having said that, I know when I was working through the pandemic and we're working from home, and all my colleagues are around the same age and they're looking after young families. A lot of them after the pandemic have said they want that work-life balance to help out at home as well, the men especially. So, the thought process is changing, and a lot of them are now realizing what they've missed out on in terms of their kids upbringing, especially when the children are much younger. And it's worked both ways. For some, they can't wait to get back to the office and
Get away from the kids.
get away. And then for others, it's like, oh my God, I'm missing out on this really beautiful time of spending with my family, which is more important. And therefore, can I work from home a bit longer? Or do I need to change my job to something that's going to offer me to work from home, 3-4 times?
Do you think there's this with our generation? There's this loyalty of where you work and you end up working longer, whereas the younger generation, they will see what works for them and be willing to move around more. And do you think that comes from our parents who probably worked in jobs for 30 odd years and never left the same place?
I think so. I certainly, from my experience, I absolutely agree with that. When we were looking at what career options or what university subjects, it's like, well, this is it. Whatever you choose to do at university, this is it. Expect yourself to be in it for 40, 50 years because, your parents did that for 40, 50 years. And there's almost this thing of, oh my God, you can't change your career now, or you can't keep moving organizations because this organization's given you the best opportunities, or they've done X, Y, and Z for you. I know I wasn't able to quit my job for a long time because I felt loyal. I felt that loyalty to the organization, and I almost felt as if what will they do when I leave? Oh my God, everything's going to fall apart when I'm not there.
That is so true, because that's something that I can resonate with, and quite a lot of the people that I know, they act, or we act, as if we own the whole organization, and if we leave, everything will fall apart. Obviously it won't, because everyone's replaceable.
I think
indispensable.
young people now see it
See it
differently. And you have to remember, when we were growing up, you didn't see those kind of careers or opportunities, and careers that are here now may not be there in 10 years time. So things are evolving so quickly. The pace is so fast. And young people are keeping up with that, or at least trying to, and hence the movement, so that they can gain.
In our time, we didn't have YouTubers. That's a career in itself now.
Exactly.
Influencers, that kind
That's
of
it.
stuff.
Exactly.
And can you imagine an Indian parent, and you tell them, "Oh, my job is to sit at home."
I'd like to see how you'd explain that.
Well, actually, do you know what? I've actually got a story about this. So, our brother has gone slightly viral, doing what he's doing, and I know my dad
On
did
TikTok.
on TikTok, and I know my dad actually said to him last week. He was like, "You need to stop with the videos because they just don't get it.
Don't get it.
Yeah.
They just don't get it." And it's completely fair enough, because we didn't believe it until he went viral either.
Well, my eldest son did history of art at university, and in the
Oh
family.
my God.
What's that?
He's Asian. How dare he?
Yeah. What is that? And like, what will that give you? What kind of job can you get from that? These questions were raised for sure.
Yeah.
Did it? This is an interesting point that you've brought up. How were you with the fact that he wanted to choose that subject then?
Well, when he came to me, I really had no clue. I had no clue what history of art is. And my reaction, and I'm very ashamed to say this, because I'm really a very modern, I think,
Aren't we all?
is to say, what kind of job would you get? I really said
So
that.
we still, because it's ingrained in us. And
But
to be honest,
my husband was totally different. He was so ecstatic that my son was going to explore a subject that was so fascinating. He clearly
wasn't
knew
he brought up with
something about
Desi
it.
parents?
Very much so, even more so
Oh.
than mine. Even more so than mine. He's a very traditional family.
Wow.
Both my parents were educated.
It brings up a really interesting point, and this was the interesting thing about getting you to talk about careers, because we all know that it's the biggest thing that our parents will tell us about: get your education, and then it's straight into a job. But the fact that we're all very modern till it comes to our kids. Like, what?
Yes.
You are not
so
going to be
modern.
doing that. But then our generation is reanalyzing that, where it's like, actually, all right, let's see where this goes with gritted teeth.
Yeah, we're not ones to completely stop it. We're not ones to block it. We may be shocked, but we'll be open to talking about it.
Is this something that you discuss in your coaching, about not having the fear of picking a different path from the norm?
Absolutely. And I think it for the older, the people who've been in a career for a long time and are so comfortable there, or have lost their confidence. And so it's when they have to think about changing their career in particular, that is quite a fearful process.
And why because it happens quite often, why do people lose their confidence?
Oh gosh, there's so many reasons. So, I feel this more for mothers, because they've spent so long nurturing their families, they haven't paid attention, or not been able to pay attention to their careers, and they've allowed it to just plod along. They're happy, they're getting the income, they can do the job, but then going past them are all these people younger than them, who are going way past them, becoming the managers, doing all these different things, and they get stuck. They've suddenly realized that, gosh, I don't have all these skills.
When someone takes a break from their career, when they are obviously in mat leave, and if they decide to have a longer time away, you do pick up on so many skills. A big part being patient. I mean,
Absolutely.
Kids have no reasoning, whereas adults actually you can reason with them, which I'm finding at the moment. To be fair, kids, everybody. But this isn't something that is seen to be a positive in the workplace, which is absolutely crazy, in my opinion.
Correct. And also individuals don't see that they have those transferable skills. They don't see it, because as mothers, as women, there's an expectation where you just do it all. You don't feel that you're gathering all these
Yeah,
skills. You don't realize you're gathering all this because it's all part and parcel of your life.
that's it.
Do you think we're set up to almost fail? Because this, when we're being brought up, it's always career, 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 but nothing's really mentioned about having children and balancing the career. And because me and Bao were discussing this.
Yeah.
Go on then, Bao. Say,
I was going to say, but the problem obviously is the fact that we are the next generation, where it's in the previous generation, it was pretty much look after your kids. Whereas now
That's
it's
right.
you have to work and look after your kids and probably do most of it, just like the previous generation anyway.
Yeah, with the I guess that middle generation that you're talking about, like maybe the likes of us, we're in a very interesting
Unique.
position because you've got the experience of maybe half of your life non-technology, and then
Ah.
the other half of your life is now technology. So you've seen very different life experiences or lifestyle compared to the newer generations. And if you think about the balance, etc., that we're talking about now, just for example working from home, that's only made possible because of technology. And that's hopefully, in if it's implemented correctly by workplaces, it will give women that opportunity to get that work life balance that we're talking about in and mothers, right? But a lot of it also stems from yourselves, because once as Ravina said, once you become a mother, your priorities just naturally change. It's just that instinct. And whatever skills you pick up, you have to constantly remember those skills can be translated into a work environment, maybe differently, but you can always try and link it to something that is going to be useful when you're returning back into work. um, a lot of organizations are recognizing that right now. So some of the larger ones are having programs that talk about return to work and helping you kind of phase you back in. It's happening slowly, grindingly slowly, but it's happening. And it's up to us as women to just boost each other up, help each other up, and point out that, hey, these are skills that you feel you've lost, but here are all these additional skills. I mean, talk about time management, talk about multitasking. When you're a mother and you're able to do three things with a baby on you, I mean, do you know what I
It's
mean?
so
Like,
true. So
do you know what
true.
I mean? And you still have the presence of mind to say, this goes there, this goes there, this one needs to be there at this time, this one's got this class, and you've got a whole timetable in your head, and it's military precision. I mean, you got skills.
that is true. Like, for
So
example, when
join the army, ladies. Sorry, Chad.
so I took 8 years out of working, so it was a chunk of time.
Mm.
So going back was like, oh my god.
Mm.
I remember sitting in my interview thinking, don't mention you got kids, don't mention you got kids.
Mm.
But somewhere I mentioned that I've got kids. And then I found, and I thought to myself, if this person doesn't want to employ me because I've got kids, then I'm not going to the right place to be employed,
Correct.
That's right.
Correct.
because you're going to have to take a bit of time off here and there if your kids get sick. And if you've got an employer that isn't accepting of that, do you really want to work there?
And
And
you would find, even if you were to get the jobs, you wouldn't be happy because it doesn't meet your values.
that's right.
That's it. Mm.
What's important to you, it needs to match with where you want to work as well.
Yeah.
Because if it's a two-way relationship, um, no matter what you try and do. So if it's always one way, you're not going to be happy.
I had the opposite experience where I was working after 3 months after having the baby. And you're right, it is the values. I decided to step away from it because it was actually, it's not where I wanted to be. Your
Yeah,
values do, you do
correct.
need to
They do.
have a different perspective once you have kids. But then do you, this is a question that I've been sort of pondering in that case. In a day and age where we are looking for equal rights, equal opportunities, going up the ladder as women, we want to be further up the ladder. Do you think in that case that we are slightly stepping back and going to, I wouldn't say sexist point of view, in saying the woman ends up bringing the kids up and all that sort of stuff. But do you think it is slightly harder for women to go further up because of that reason? Because I know that I stepped away from my career for that very reason.
I think that's quite tricky. It used to be that way. I can honestly say that, you know, you feel like you're stepping back, and therefore even when I was working in the corporate roles, there were very few women who are at that senior level that you can look up to. Obviously there's a lot of things going on out there now where, you know, they're looking at that and bringing in leadership who are more female, in the top management of organizations, and starting to bring in role models, giving you pathways, more flexibility, you know, that kind of stuff is coming in. But equally, what we've found, certainly since we started our own business as well, is, you know, you may have taken a step back from an organization, but the amount of entrepreneurial, a kind of, it's just shot up, because a lot of mums have so many skills that they're able to do it from home, part-time, as their own business, and actually get that work-life balance. But they're contributing quite uniquely, again, to that role model situation, because their kids are going to see that, and when their kids grow up, they're going to have a very different expectation of what employment looks like, what that work-life balance looks like. Because, I mean, honestly, we've come across so many mothers who've just gone down the entrepreneurial route. Now, it's not for everyone, agreed, but, you know, necessity brings about that, and people have found ways around it.
Well, I also believe that there's been a realization. You know, we were for so long, yes, we want to hit that glass ceiling and all the rest of it. And I think there's a realization, well, actually, it's okay. We're okay where we're at, whatever that we choose that to be. I feel a lot of that is coming through. And I certainly, one of the things I think we find in the coaching as well, when the women come to us with these decisions that they have to make about where they go next, they do come to that with the support and help and the belief that they realize, actually, yeah, I'm okay where I'm at. I want to do this, and I will, you know, because they know they can, but they just lost the confidence to do that.
Yeah.
And it all comes down to being happy with whichever decision you make, isn't it?
Whatever, everything comes down to that. People may think it's about the money, people may think it's about the time. Ultimately, it's about what is making them happy, and then they can find a way. You know, I mean, we in fact today only we were discussing this in terms of, even for coaching, when people seek help, the thing that for themselves they know, and a lot of women are at that phase where they don't know what to do, so they seek help. But then what puts them off is the money, and and you think, well, at that point, well, actually, it's that realization. It's coaching them to realize, well, actually, what is this really about?
Yeah, and I'd kind of add to that bit as well, because when we're talking about, it's not just about changing your careers. It's not just about kind of the money side of things. You can be happy doing whatever you want, but it doesn't mean you're going to get it in your next step. So don't let that put you off. It may take you 5 steps, 6 steps to get there. It's not necessary that tomorrow, when you go and find another job, that's it. You've hit the jackpot. It may take some kind of strategic moves before you get to where you want to be. Or it could be that you fail 3 or 4 times before you hit the right one that's going to truly make you happy. And that's okay as well. But you have to accept that, and you have to be okay in all of those situations. So don't, when you put too many expectations on yourself, and to get it right the first time, that's immense. That's a lot.
You're setting yourself up for a fall, aren't you?
You are, because that, you don't need that kind of pressure. You know, just go with it, chill.
And I'm gonna bring this podcast episode to an end, because I think that's such a nice place. When you said chill, I think that's all we needed here.
At UKAN, we believe you can.
And on that point, It's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, changing_suits, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.